The sound of champagne fizzing filled the air as my father raised his glass, the crystal catching the soft gold light spilling through the country club chandeliers. "To our princess," he said, his voice smooth, proud, the kind of tone that used to make me ache. Everyone clapped. Everyone smiled. Everyone looked at my brother's wife like she was spun from silk. I stood near the back of the room, clutching my own untouched glass, the bubbles long gone flat. The satin sleeve of my dress brushed against my wrist as I exhaled, trying not to let my expression crack. I could feel the gloss on my lips drying, the perfume I'd chosen, jasmine and amber, now clinging too heavy to my throat. It had been years since I'd been in a room with all of them, my father, my brother, the whispers of the golden boy following him like perfume trails. But here I was, back in the middle of the people who had taught me exactly what it meant to be invisible. My phone buzzed in my clutch just as Dad raised his glass higher. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in years, Marissa Collins. My breath caught. She was the last person who saw me the night I left home. And somehow, that message, appearing in the middle of this perfect family picture, felt like the universe clearing its throat. Maybe it was finally time to let the truth speak for itself. I was 21 the night everything fell apart. Our house smelled like cedar and tension, the kind that lingers long after words are spoken. Dad sat in his usual armchair, the TV flickering behind him, while Mom folded laundry like it was a shield. I stood there, clutching the acceptance letter that had just arrived from the New York School of Design, the one I'd spent 2 years dreaming about. "Dad," I started, trying to sound confident. "I got in. It's a full acceptance. I just need some help with the first semester's living costs until I can find work there." He didn't even look up. "You already have a job here, Ava. Why chase nonsense degrees when your brother's about to start a family? We have responsibilities." Responsibilities. That word always meant him, never me. "Dad, I've been saving. I just need—" He cut me off with a sigh. "Ava, enough. We're helping Mason get his business off the ground. You can't expect us to fund your little hobby." A hobby? My dream, my years of sketching, designing, staying up till 2 a.m., reduced to a word that dripped like venom. Mom stayed silent. She always did. Her eyes met mine for a moment, soft, apologetic, then dropped to the towel in her hands. Something inside me cracked. The letter trembled between my fingers. "You always find a way to help him. Every single time. What about me?" Dad's jaw tightened. "You're not a priority right now." The words hit harder than I expected. They didn't echo, they sank deep and cold. That night, I packed what little I had, sketchbooks, my laptop, and a bracelet my grandmother had given me before she passed. It was a thin silver band with the words, "Make your own light." She used to say, "The world won't always hand you the sun, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to spark your own." I slipped it onto my wrist, tears smudging the edges of my acceptance letter. By dawn, I was gone. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just the hum of a Greyhound bus heading north, away from expectations, towards something unknown but mine. I didn't know it then, but that night would become the moment everything started, the day I stopped waiting to be chosen. The first year in New York nearly broke me. I rented a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat in Queens, the kind where the walls hummed with the sound of dryers and arguments. The window didn't open all the way, and the radiator hissed through the night, but it was mine. My own place. My own start. Days were for classes. Nights were for shifts at a diner that smelled perpetually of burnt coffee and bleach. My hands were always dry from wiping tables, my sketchbooks smudged with grease. Still, every night before I fell asleep, I'd whisper to myself, "Make your own light," and trace the edge of my grandmother's bracelet until my heartbeat slowed. I learned quickly that success doesn't arrive, you build it one scraped knee at a time. By the end of the year, I landed an unpaid internship at a small design studio. The owner, Margaret Hale, was a sharp, silver-haired woman who had seen too much of life to care about pretense. She wore linen like armor and had eyes that missed nothing. She caught me one afternoon, fixing the proportions on a concept board that wasn't mine. Instead of scolding me, she tilted her head and said, "You've got a good eye, Bennett. You see what others overlook." That became the first real validation I'd ever felt. Margaret became more than a boss. She became the mentor I didn't know I needed. She taught me everything about design, business, and resilience. "Don't chase approval," she'd say. "Chase purpose." The next few years blurred into a rhythm of grind and growth. I worked my way from intern to assistant designer, then from assistant to creative lead. There were nights I fell asleep at my drafting table, my hair tangled around my pencil. Mornings when the city outside felt too loud for my quiet determination. When Margaret retired, she handed me her portfolio and said, "You're ready." I didn't believe her. Not until my first solo client, a boutique hotel in upstate New York, commissioned me to redesign their entire interior. That project changed everything. My designs caught attention. One job led to 3, then 10. Soon, Ava Bennett Interiors was born, quietly, without announcement, without family support. I kept everything low-key online. No flashy posts, no grand reveals. Just a few pictures of city sunsets, coffee mugs, and sketches. My father still believed I worked somewhere in design, and honestly, that was fine with me. Because while he was busy toasting Mason's milestones, I was building mine, brick by brick, client by client, dream by dream. And yet, when the invitation for my brother's baby shower arrived in my inbox, gold and cream with embossed lettering, something in me hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, the one that had been quiet for years, whispered, "Go. It's time they saw the light you built." The baby shower had that perfect, filtered kind of charm, pastel balloons, mason jars wrapped in lace, and a playlist full of soft acoustic covers. Everything looked curated for Instagram, right down to the cupcake spelling, "It's a girl." My father stood near the front, beaming like a man who had everything figured out. Mason, my brother, hovered proudly beside his glowing wife, Natalie, who was already surrounded by cooing relatives. I smiled politely, nodding through small talk and congratulations, pretending not to notice how few relatives looked surprised that I'd actually shown up. Dad's speech came next. He lifted his glass, his gold watch catching the light. "To our princess," he said warmly, glancing at Natalie. "And to Mason, the best son any father could ask for. This baby girl is a blessing. And this gift," he held up a wrapped box, "is from all of us. A start for her bright future." The words "from all of us" hit me like a slow echo, familiar, cruelly poetic. I wondered if they even noticed that all of us never really included me. I turned my glass in my hand, feeling the chill against my skin, when Natalie looked at me with that polite, distant smile. "Ava, you work in design, right? Maybe you could help us with the nursery if you have time." Her tone was kind but condescending, as if I was some amateur dabbling between hobbies. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. "Actually," I said, setting my glass down, "I'd love to help. But you might want to check with your contractor first." Her brows furrowed. "Our contractor?" "Bennett Interiors." "That's your firm?" Mason asked, half confused, half laughing. I nodded slowly. "Yes. My firm. The one designing your new family home." The room stilled. The laughter faded like music being turned down. Dad blinked, his mouth parting. "Wait, you're that Bennett? The one from the Architectural Digest feature Mason showed me last month." I held his gaze. "The same." For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence was heavy, but for once, it didn't suffocate me. Natalie was the first to recover, stammering, "We had no idea." "I know," I said softly. "You never ask." The shock in my father's eyes was something I'd once begged for: recognition, pride, maybe even guilt. Now it just looked like confusion trying to turn into respect. I gestured toward the floral arch behind them. "You see, I built my own company. From the ground up. While you all were building your perfect life, I was building mine." Someone murmured my name, but I wasn't done. "I never wanted to prove anything," I continued, my voice calm but steady. "I just wanted to be seen. To be treated as capable. But maybe this, I waved lightly toward the crowd, was what it took for you to look at me and finally see me. Dad swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he finally said, Ava, I didn't know. I know, I said again. You never tried to. He looked down, ashamed, while Mason shifted uncomfortably beside Natalie. For the first time, they didn't look like the golden ones. They just looked human. I straightened my shoulders, offering a small smile. Congratulations, by the way. She's lucky. She'll have everything I didn't. Just make sure she learns to earn what she's given. Then I picked up my glass again and raised it slightly. To your princess, I said quietly, and to the light we make on our own. The glasses clinked around the room, but the only sound that mattered was the sharp, crystal note of mine, echoing like closure. 2 days after the baby shower, my father called. For a full minute, neither of us spoke. I could hear the faint hum of his office clock, the same one that used to tick through our arguments years ago. Ava, he said finally, your work, it's remarkable. I'm proud of you. Those words should have healed something in me, but they didn't. Not right away. They just hovered there, too late and too light. I appreciate that, I said, my voice even. What made you decide that now? He hesitated. Mason told me you've done some big projects. He said you might be able to advise him. His company's in a bit of trouble. There it was. The truth, clean and predictable. I leaned back in my office chair, eyes sweeping over the view, downtown Manhattan glittering beneath a storm-gray sky. My reflection looked calm, but my pulse carried the weight of every sleepless night it took to get here. I can help, I said finally, but on my terms. He went quiet. I continued. First, I'll look into Mason's company, but I'm not fixing anything unless he's involved. Really involved. He needs to rebuild it himself. I'll guide, not rescue. Of course, Dad said quickly. Second, I said, my tone sharpening. Mom deserves a voice. She spent her whole life keeping the peace. That ends now. If we're going to rebuild this family, it won't be on silence. That one landed like a soft strike. I heard him exhale, slow and uncertain. And third, I said, lowering my voice, you and I, we start over if we're going to start at all. But this time, you don't get to decide my worth. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just said, you sound like your grandmother. A faint smile tugged at my lips. She'd like to know someone finally listened. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful. Power didn't look like shouting or revenge. It looked like clarity. Later that week, Mason reached out. He sounded nervous, younger somehow. Ava, I didn't realize what you built. I was too wrapped up in my own stuff. I want to do better. I believed him. Not completely, but enough to start somewhere. We met in my office the next day. He looked around at the space, the artwork, the design boards, the view, and for the first time, I saw awe instead of arrogance in his eyes. This is you, he said quietly. This is what happens, I replied, when someone stops waiting for permission. I gave him my plan, direct, structured, no shortcuts. He agreed to every condition, knowing this time the rules weren't his to make. Before he left, he turned back to me. Thanks for not shutting the door. I met his gaze. I did once. You just never noticed when I built my own on the other side. Spring came early that year. The city thawed, and so did something inside me. I walked through my office one Friday evening after everyone had gone home, sunlight spilling in through the tall windows, catching dust motes that danced like quiet applause. The walls were lined with framed designs, hotels, restaurants, homes, all pieces of a life I'd carved out of rejection. On my desk sat a small white envelope. Inside was a card written in my father's shaky handwriting. Ava, thank you for helping Mason. You were right, he needed to build it himself. We're proud of you. Love, Dad and Mom. I stared at the words for a long time. They weren't perfect, but they were honest, and that was more than I ever expected. A week later, I visited their home for the first time in years. The same house I'd left behind, only quieter now. Mom greeted me at the door, her eyes wet before she even spoke. She hugged me so tight it felt like an apology wrapped in warmth. Mason was there too, holding his newborn daughter, the princess from the shower. He looked up and smiled, soft and humbled. "She's Ava Grace," he said. For the first time, I forgot to be guarded. I touched the baby's tiny hand, delicate, new, unburdened by our history. "She's beautiful," I whispered. Later, as the evening sun melted across the porch, Dad brought out a bottle of champagne, the same kind from the shower. But this time, he didn't raise it for Mason.
He looked at me.
"To Ava," he said quietly, "to the light she made on her own." My throat tightened. I didn't need the toast, but the gesture, the recognition, landed deep. I raised my glass too, to learning that sometimes love takes longer to find its words. As we drank, the baby stirred in her sleep, sunlight touching her tiny face. For a moment, I saw all the versions of me that had led here, the scared girl with the letter, the tired waitress, the driven designer, all standing in the same warm light. My bracelet caught the sun, the words engraved still clear after all these years. "Make your own light." And for the first time, I realized I had. Funny, I whispered to myself, smiling, how the glass they once raised for someone else ended up reflecting me all along.